Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, March 23rd, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside is going to be quite warm today, with a high of 89.5 degrees and a low of 71 degrees, so please keep cool if you are out and about. In today's episode, we are analyzing the high stakes surrounding the 5-day pause and what it means for the potential of war with Iran. We will also examine the details behind the communication issues at the LaGuardia control tower during the fatal runway collision. Plus, we have a variety of other headlines to keep you updated on the latest developments around the world. All this and more on Alex's News. Stay tuned as we break down the stories that matter most. We start this morning with a story that has the entire world on edge. A 48-hour military ultimatum from President Trump to Iran expired just hours ago, and we are now in deeply uncertain territory. Ethan covers national security for us and has been tracking this all weekend. Ethan, where do things stand right now?
The short answer is we got a last-minute reprieve. The deadline for Iran to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz passed at 11:44 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time today, and strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure were expected almost immediately. But President Trump posted on Truth Social that he's instructed the military to pause for 5 days. He cited what he called, quote, very good and productive conversations, end quote, between U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, with Oman acting as a mediator. NPR and ABC News both report that while this pause opens a diplomatic window, the U.S. military remains on high alert and is fully prepared to execute the original plan if talks collapse.
So 5 more days of talking. What exactly was the original threat on the table?
President Trump laid it out on Saturday. He said if the strait wasn't cleared of all Iranian drones, missiles, and naval threats within 48 hours, the U.S. would, quote, hit and obliterate, end quote, Iran's domestic power plants. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt framed the blockade as economic warfare, which makes sense when you consider that roughly 20 to 25% of the world's oil passes through that waterway every day. So we're not talking about a symbolic choke point. It's the single most important bottleneck in the global energy supply.
Let's back up, though. This didn't start with the Strait of Hormuz, did it?
Not at all, and I think that context gets lost in the headline. The U.S. Department of Defense has confirmed that the kinetic phase of this war actually began almost a month ago, on February 28th. That's when the United States and Israel launched coordinated, wide-scale airstrikes under 2 separate operation names. The American side called it Operation Epic Fury. Israel called theirs Operation Roaring Lion. The goal was to degrade Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities before they could become an even greater threat.
And there have been reports about strikes targeting Iranian leadership directly. What do we know?
Sky News has reported what they are calling decapitation strikes that have fundamentally changed who's actually running Iran right now. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was reportedly killed earlier this month. And Sky News International Affairs editor Dominic Waghorn, reporting from what he described as a tense and subdued Tehran, confirmed that a massive blast recently killed Ali Larijani, a top security official. So Iran has lost its supreme leader and key figures in the command structure. That's important because it helps explain why some analysts see the strait closure not as unprovoked aggression, but as a retaliatory defensive measure from a regime that's been hit very hard.
That reframes things considerably. So how is Iran responding militarily if its leadership has been decimated?
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, has essentially shifted to what analysts are calling an asymmetric scorched earth strategy. They know they can't go toe-to-toe with the U.S. Navy in a traditional engagement. So instead, Iran's Defense Council has warned that any land invasion or continued bombardment of the mainland would trigger the mining of the entire Persian Gulf. Military experts consider that a nuclear option in naval warfare terms, because it wouldn't just block the strait. It would shut down commercial shipping across the whole Gulf for months, since you simply cannot demine waters while people are still shooting at you.
And they've gone further than just threatening mines, haven't they?
They have, and this is where it gets really alarming for the Gulf states. Iranian state media, including the Fars news agency, published what amounts to a target list of critical infrastructure in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. We're talking about the Barka nuclear power plant in Abu Dhabi, the Jebel Ali power and desalination plant in Dubai, and the Ras Al Khair desalination facility in Saudi Arabia. The IRGC's message was blunt. If Iranian plants are hit, they will, quote, plunge the entire Middle East into darkness, end quote, by striking the facilities that supply power to American bases and drinking water to Gulf cities.
Drinking water. That would be a humanitarian catastrophe on top of everything else.
Absolutely. Those desalination plants aren't luxuries. They are the primary source of fresh water for millions of people in some of the most arid places on Earth. Knocking them out wouldn't just be a military escalation. It would create a civilian crisis almost overnight. And it's clearly designed as a deterrent, a way of telling Washington that any attack on Iranian infrastructure will carry consequences far beyond Iran's borders.
There's also this so-called safe corridor Iran has set up. What's that about?
This is a fascinating and, frankly, brazen move. While the strait remains closed to U.S. and Israeli vessels, Iran has created a shipping corridor for what it calls neutral nations, primarily China and India. They're reportedly charging transit fees as high as $2 million per tanker, so Iran is simultaneously using the blockade as a weapon of war against the West and as a revenue stream to fund its war effort. It splits the international response because countries benefiting from cheaper access to oil have less incentive to pressure Tehran.
Meanwhile, there's this debate about how far Iran's missiles can actually reach. What sparked that?
On March 21st, just 2 days ago, Iran launched a missile toward the joint U.S.-UK base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. That's roughly 4,000 kilometers away. Following that, the Israel Defense Forces claimed that Iranian missiles can now reach European capitals, specifically naming London, Paris, and Berlin. That's a dramatic claim that would change the security calculus for all of Europe.
And the UK didn't exactly agree with that assessment.
Not at all. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the UK Ministry of Defence pushed back pretty hard. Sky News reported that the British government said there is, quote, no assessment, end quote, suggesting the UK mainland is currently a target, and they dismissed the IDF's claims as an exaggeration intended to escalate Western involvement. Independent analysts from Jane's, which is one of the most respected defense intelligence firms in the world, offered some middle ground. They said Iran likely did demonstrate a 4,000-kilometer range using a Khorramshahr 4 variant, also known as the Khaybar, but it probably required a payload range trade-off. That means sacrificing accuracy and destructive power to achieve the distance.
So the range might be real, but the threat to European cities might be overstated.
That's the consensus among most independent analysts right now. Reaching a target and reliably destroying it with a meaningful warhead are very different things. But the political damage of that claim is already done. European publics are now asking whether this war could land on their doorstep, and that pressure flows uphill to governments very quickly.
Let's talk about the economic fallout, because markets have been reacting sharply.
Oil prices have surged past $112 per barrel as of today. The International Energy Agency has warned that this crisis could be more severe than the 1970s oil shocks, which is a staggering comparison. In the UK specifically, financial markets are now pricing in 4 interest rate hikes to combat energy-driven inflation. Mortgage rates and government bond yields have hit levels not seen since the 2008 financial crisis. So people who think this war is far away from their daily lives are about to feel it at the gas pump and in their monthly housing payments.
What about the United Nations? Is there any momentum toward a ceasefire?
The Security Council did pass Resolution 2817 condemning Iran's interference with global trade, but it's deadlocked beyond that. Russia and China continue to abstain on anything related to a ceasefire. Moscow has gone a step further, warning that strikes near nuclear facilities like Bushehr are, quote, catastrophically dangerous, end quote. So there's no unified international framework for ending this. The The diplomacy is essentially bilateral, running through Oman, with the rest of the world watching nervously.
So what are analysts saying about these next 5 days?
Military analyst Professor Michael Clark told Sky News that this war is, quote, spinning out of control, end quote. He sees the U.S. thrashing about for a diplomatic exit that doesn't require abandoning its freedom of navigation doctrine, which is a core principle Washington has defended for decades. Iran, on the other hand, appears to be betting that its ability to destroy the global economy is a more powerful weapon than anything the U.S. military can drop on its power grid. These 5 days are essentially a test of whether that mutual deterrence can produce a deal or whether it just delays the inevitable.
A high-stakes 5 days ahead. Ethan, thank you for walking us through all of that.
Happy to do it.
We turn now to a developing story out of New York, where a deadly collision on a runway at LaGuardia Airport has left 2 pilots dead and dozens of people injured. Chloe has been following this one closely since it broke late last night. Chloe, walk us through what happened.
So this happened just before midnight last night, around 11:38 p.m. Eastern. An Air Canada Express regional jet, flight AC 8646, had just landed on runway 4 at LaGuardia. It was a Bombardier CRJ 900 arriving from Montreal, with 72 passengers and 4 crew members on board. According to NPR and the Associated Press, as the aircraft was slowing down at roughly 21 to 24 knots, it slammed into a Port Authority fire truck near a taxiway intersection.
A fire truck on an active runway. How does that even happen?
That's really the central question investigators are trying to answer right now. The truck, identified as Truck 1, is an airport rescue and firefighting vehicle operated by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It had been dispatched to respond to a completely separate emergency involving a different aircraft. ABC News and CBC both published photos from the scene, and they are just gut-wrenching. The nose of the jet was completely crushed, the cockpit mangled beyond recognition, and the fuselage was tilted upward. The fire truck ended up on its side off the runway.
And the 2 pilots did not survive.
That's right. Both the pilot and co-pilot were killed on impact. Al Jazeera and the Associated Press report that both were based in Canada, and their identities are being withheld for now while families are notified. The jet was operated by Jazz Aviation, which handles Air Canada Express regional routes. The NTSB has identified the aircraft as a 20-year-old CRJ 900, registration CGNJZ.
What about everyone else on board and the firefighters in that truck?
So beyond the 2 fatalities, roughly 39 to 41 people were taken to hospitals across the area, primarily passengers. The good news is that most of them were treated for minor injuries and released by this morning. But several passengers do remain in serious condition. The 2 Port Authority employees inside the fire truck sustained serious injuries, including broken limbs, though the AP reports their conditions are stable and not life-threatening.
You mentioned the fire truck was responding to a different emergency. What was that about?
This is where the story gets really complicated. According to Fox 8 and the Economic Times, a United Airlines flight number 2384 had aborted its takeoff twice because of mechanical warnings. After those aborted takeoffs, the crew reported what they described as a sickening odor in the cabin that was actually incapacitating flight attendants. No gates were immediately available for the plane to return to, so the United pilots declared an emergency. That's when Truck 1 was dispatched to go assist that aircraft.
So the tower was already dealing with one emergency when this collision happened?
Exactly, and that matters enormously for understanding how this unfolded. The controller in the tower was managing a high-stress situation with the United flight, while also handling normal arrivals and departures, including that Air Canada jet on its landing roll. NPR reported on radio transmissions captured by liveatc.net that paint a really alarming picture of what happened in those final seconds.
What do those recordings reveal?
An air traffic controller can be heard clearing Truck 1 to cross runway 4. But then the controller appears to realize that the Air Canada jet is still rolling down that same runway. You can hear the controller urgently shouting, quote, "Stop, Truck 1! Stop, stop, stop," end quote, before trying to warn the Air Canada crew. And then, in a later exchange with another aircraft, NPR reports the controller was recorded saying, quote, "I messed up," end quote. It's a devastating acknowledgement in real time of what had just gone wrong.
That's chilling. Has there been any explanation for why that clearance was given in the first place?
Not officially, not yet. But there's a growing controversy that could help explain it, and it centers on staffing levels in the tower that night. The National Air Traffic Controllers Association, known as NATCA, says that the LaGuardia Tower was operating in what's called a combined configuration. Their president, Nick Daniels, confirmed that at the time of the collision, a single controller was handling both the local frequency, which covers the runways, and the ground frequency, which covers the taxiways. That's 2 jobs being done by one person.
One controller handling both frequencies during multiple emergencies? How did it get to that point?
Well, this is where the partial government shutdown enters the picture. And it's become a major point of contention. The shutdown began on February 14th, so it's been going on for about 5.5 weeks now. Catherine Garcia, the executive director of the Port Authority, initially stated that air traffic controllers were still on duty and hadn't been affected by the shutdown. And technically, NPR and the New York Times, citing AP reporting, note that the FAA's funding wasn't directly cut because the shutdown primarily hits the Department of Homeland Security.
But you're saying the reality in the tower was different from that official line?
Significantly different. NATCA argues that the shutdown created staffing shortages that prevented normal controller rotations. So even though controllers were technically on the job, there weren't enough of them to maintain safe coverage. That one controller had been in position on his own for an extended period. And the union also pointed to what they called substantial distractions caused by 6 weeks of forced unpaid labor. These are safety professionals who've been working without paychecks, dealing with personal financial stress and fatigue on top of an already demanding job.
So the investigation is going to have to untangle all of this. Where does that stand?
The NTSB has deployed what they call a GO team, led by Chair Jennifer Homendy, and they're already on the ground at LaGuardia. According to Spectrum News NY1, the investigation is going to focus on several key areas. They want to know why the truck was cleared to cross an active runway in the first place. They're looking at visibility because rain and mist had reduced it to about 3 miles at the time of the crash. And they're examining human factors, specifically whether fatigue or reduced oversight played a role in the controller's error.
Are there safety systems that should have caught this before it turned deadly?
There are, and that's another critical piece of the investigation. LaGuardia has a system called ASDEX, which stands for Airport Surface Detection Equipment. It's essentially a ground radar system designed specifically to prevent runway incursions like this one. It's supposed to alert controllers when there's a conflict on the runway. The NTSB will be looking hard at why that system either didn't activate or didn't alert the controller in time to prevent the collision. That could have major implications for airports across the country.
What's the situation at LaGuardia right now? I know a lot of travelers are trying to figure out their plans today.
The airport was shut down immediately after the crash last night. Initial estimates suggested it would reopen by 2 p.m. today, but as of now, the closure has already triggered a massive wave of cancellations and delays rippling through airports across the entire Northeast. Travelers should definitely check with their airlines before heading to any airport in the region because the disruptions are widespread.
And I should note, there was some confusion on social media last night with people mixing this up with other incidents. Can you clear that up?
Yeah, that's worth addressing. Some posts were circulating images and details from a 2022 collision in Lima, Peru, involving a LATAM jet and a fire truck, and also from a 2024 incident in Tokyo involving a Japan Airlines plane. Those are completely separate events. Officials have verified that last night's crash at LaGuardia is a distinct incident. The NTSB says they expect to release a preliminary factual report within the next 2 to 4 weeks.
A lot still to learn here. Is there anything else we should watch for in the coming days?
I think the biggest thing to watch is how the staffing question plays out. If investigators determine that the combined controller position was a direct factor, the political fallout could be significant, especially with the shutdown still ongoing. There are real questions now about whether other airports are operating under similar conditions, and whether this could happen again somewhere else. This is going to stay in the headlines for a while.
Such a tragic story, and clearly one with a lot of layers still to unfold. Chloe, thank you for walking us through all of it.
Of course, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In Greece, authorities are hoping to keep the scales of justice on the right track as the trial for the nation's deadliest rail disaster officially opened in the city of Larissa this Monday, March 23, 2026. It has been more than 3 years since the head-on collision in the Tempe Valley claimed 57 lives, and now 36 defendants find themselves in the hot seat. This group, which includes the duty station master, senior transport ministry officials, and executives from OSE and Hellenic Train, faces charges ranging from endangering public transport to manslaughter. If convicted, they could be facing life sentences, ensuring they stay at the end of the line for a very long time. Because the case is so massive, proceedings are being held at a converted campus to make room for approximately 250 lawyers and hundreds of witnesses. Legal experts believe this trial will be a long haul expected to last at least 2 years. While the court looks for accountability, railway workers are striking for 24 hours to highlight the parlous state of the country's safety systems, which remained antiquated despite European Union funding. Back at home, the Supreme Court is currently deciding if the check is in the mail for election integrity. On March 23, justices heard oral arguments regarding a high-stakes case out of Mississippi that questions the legality of counting mail-in ballots that arrive after Election Day. This practice is currently allowed in 14 states and the District of Columbia, but a ruling against it could force states like New York and California to change their tune just months before the 2026 midterm elections. In a related development that is certainly balloting out of control, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco has seized more than 500,000 ballots from a November 2025 special election. Bianco, who is also running for governor, claims he is investigating a discrepancy of approximately 45,800 votes. However, California Attorney General Rob Bonta has condemned the seizure as an unprecedented move that undermines public trust, noting that local officials haven't found a single shred of evidence regarding widespread fraud. If you're heading to the airport today, you might find that security has a bit more ice than usual. President Trump confirmed that hundreds of immigration and customs enforcement agents are deploying to major hubs starting today, March 23, to assist the TSA during an ongoing partial government shutdown. White House border czar Tom Homan described the agents as a force multiplier, intended to handle non-technical duties like checking passenger IDs and guarding exits, so that the remaining TSA staff can focus on specialized security screenings. The move follows a 6-week funding impasse that has caused over 400 TSA resignations and left travelers stuck in lines for over 6 hours in cities like Atlanta. Critics, including Hakeem Jeffries and the American Federation of Government Employees, worry the plan won't fly, arguing that these armed immigration officers lack aviation training and might cause tensions to reach a new altitude. In Miami, a former congressman's past is catching up to him, as jury selection and opening statements began today for a trial that is proving some friendships are truly a trial of their own. David Rivera is accused of acting as an unregistered foreign agent for Venezuela, allegedly securing a $50 million contract to lobby the Trump administration into softening its stance on the Nicolas Maduro government. The star witness is expected to be Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who used to be Rivera's roommate. While Rubio isn't accused of any wrongdoing, he will be questioned Tuesday about meetings Rivera arranged to influence Latin American policy. Evidence in the case also mentions high-profile figures like Susie Wiles and Representative Pete Sessions, showing that Rivera was certainly lobbying for a lot of attention. Finally, Hawaii is beginning to surface after the worst flooding the state has seen in over 20 years. A powerful Kona low storm system dumped massive amounts of rain, leading Governor Josh Green to estimate total damages at over $1 billion. Critical infrastructure took a soaking, including roads, schools, and even a hospital on Maui. While power has been restored to 1,200 customers in Waialua, roughly 2,000 others are still waiting for the lights to come back on. Thankfully, the threat from the Wahiawa Dam is receding along with the water levels, and although 200 people had to be rescued from the rising currents, there have been no reported fatalities. More than 5,500 residents north of Honolulu have been allowed to return home as the islands try to weather the abrupt aftermath. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.